Hey guys, in this video I'll analyze for you the last round game from the Norway Chess Super Tournament between Magnus Carlsen and Domaraju GUKESH. And I will describe what I think about their results, because in this game they are fighting for who takes the last place. World number one and the world chess champion sadly compete for this not such an honorable trophy. So what happened with them and why they scored not so impressively, I will tell you at the end of this video. You might notice I'm in a different place. I'm in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. I arrived here for the Uz Chess Cup. That I will also tell you later at the end of the video. So let's dive into this game. Very instructive game, by the way. Magnus showed here some class, definitely, and GUKESH showed something as well. Let's take a look. So Magnus opens with one e4 in this tournament. He dabbles with that first move. Obviously, he has played all openings existing under the sun, so this is not a surprise. Even though, like previously, I think it would be more common for him to go d4. And we get the Caro-Kann defense. Also, GUKESH has experimented with lots of different openings. Usually he plays e5, but here he decided to surprise Magnus with the Caro-Kann. And Magnus Carlsen in the confessional booth, they have this confessional booth at Norway Chess where you can come and tell the world what you think about the game in private while your opponent is thinking on their move. Magnus told the audience that actually he remembers his game from 18 or 17 years back against Jan Smith, and the first 17 moves of this game are identical. So this position occurred 17 moves ago, so it was 17 years ago, when GUKESH was just 3 years old. So GUKESH today is 20. When GUKESH was 3 years old, this was the game between Magnus Carlsen and Jan Smits, a grandmaster from the Netherlands. And Magnus won it. And in the confessional booth, Magnus told the audience that he's going to play some old man's chess, some old line that probably GUKESH is not familiar with. So this is the position of the Penov attack, which is characterized by the c4 move. In the Caro-Kann, Penov was a Soviet master who played this back in the days, but he usually played d4 first, so this is an accelerated Penov, so without d4, but later Magnus will play d4. But we will not delve too deeply in the intricacies of opening theory, even though I find it fascinating. So black takes with the knight. The idea here of knight f6 instead of queen takes d5 is that after queen takes d5, knight c3 will come with a tempo, and it's better for black to take this with the knight, which is exactly what happens. And we get this position where white has an isolated pawn on d4, which might become a weakness in some variations, but it's also a strength because it controls some important squares in black's camp, and white has more space. That is, white controls some squares on the territory of the opponent. Also, black's light squared bishop, GUKESH's light squared bishop, is stuck behind the pawn chain of black, so this gives white some pressure. Castles, rook e1. This all happened back in the days in that old Magnus's game. Actually, I checked in 2009 when that old game was played. Magnus already was 2780. So close to 2800, he was, I think, rated number 2 in the world back then. He was very young, so but already not yet world champion, but close to world number 1 already. So bishop d7, GUKESH makes the logical moves, develops the rook, and now Magnus decides to transform the position to create an isolated pawn for black as well. Even though this frees some squares for the light square bishop of black, actually it doesn't, because f5 is controlled, and if bishop g4, h3 would be possible, and actually it's white to move now, so knight e5 happens, and bishop g4 is even not possible. So this bishop does not have good prospects in life. And black goes bishop f6. Black is ready to sacrifice like the two bishops, to give the two bishops advantage to white, because then black would harass this d4 pawn, which might be uncomfortable. And this e5 knight is clearly much stronger than this horrible bishop on d7 that is blocking the queen, and that has no good squares. So bishop f4, white is in no rush. G6 is also a very logical move, because if you take a look at this position, this bishop is such a beauty, such a monster, controlling lots of squares. Just compare it with its counterpart from the black side, and you will see the difference immediately. And black wants to shorten the diagonal for this bishop of white to make it less intimidating. Queen b3 next is the move. I notice it's really weird. This all happened in that old game of Magnus, and Magnus has a phenomenal memory. He remembers like games from the Soviet chess championship of 1960, for example. I watched lots of content with Magnus, and I know like he's a treasure trove of chess trivia and facts, and he remembers all his games. But maybe he was trying to find something better. Maybe he was afraid of losing again, mixing up something, blundering, because he lost 4 classical chess games in this event. This is a record for Magnus, anti-record. At least within the last 10 years, he hasn't done this. Last time I think it was Vaikanze in 2015. He lost like 4 or 5 games there. It was a long time ago, and he was probably trying to be as cautious as possibly, tread lightly, as Walter White said in Breaking Bad. So knight e5, logical move, attacking the queen. Also, Gukesh is spending quite some time, so Gukesh doesn't know this game. When he was 3 years old, he did not, even though some might think that already when he was 3 years old, he was studying chess games of Magnus Carlsen. No, Gukesh started playing chess, I think, when he was 5 or 6, something like this, not 3. Queen b4 and bishop e6. Logical move. The bishop is very passive, yes, but the bishop is doing its job of protecting the isolated pawn. And now this is the position that Magnus had against Jan Smits, and he remembered that he went bishop h6 and then he won the game, but he remembered that he had the analysis that bishop h6 is not the best move and rook a to d1 is better, putting the rook on this file where it overprotects the d4 pawn in some variations. So this is the move that he chose. Rook a8. Also, black is trying to put the rooks on good files. Now h3, useful move, creating luft for the king. Bishop e7 attacks the queen. Queen goes to a4. And now black should have gone bishop f6 or a6 according to the engine. Those moves are better. But queen b6 is also very logical, putting some pressure on d4 and on b2. And here the engine says that the best move for white would be bishop b5, attacking the rook, and when the rook moves, the best move would be b3, preventing the knight from jumping on c4. And the engine plays really very positionally here. After knight c6, for example, the knights get traded, bishop a6 attacks the rook has to go into the corner, and white is dominating this position, even though like material is equal, white is, the evaluation of the engine is +1. So probably because c6 is so weakened, and we control c8 and probably rook c1, and sooner rather than later we'll win at least some material. So this bishop b5 sophisticated move was the best, but Magnus plays the second best move, also very nice. Knight d7. I would say that this is a very morally satisfying move to make, because you gallop with your knight to d7, straight in the enemy territory, like, I don't know, some ancient war leader, like Alexander the Great, who had this Bucephal, the name of his horse that he used in battle. You do know that when that horse died, they had luxurious ceremony where like millions and millions, equivalent of modern US dollars, were spent just to honor the memory of Bucephal. So yeah, this Bucephal will get also an honorable ceremony probably after this tournament, but it dies because the bishop the bishop takes it, has to take it. And now white has the two bishops advantage. This bishop, light squared bishop, is very beautiful here, and the dark squared bishop also is beautiful, and black has just one bishop. And also it is hanging, so black has to do something, knight c6. So white enjoys some advantage, but the engine says this is compensated by the fact that d4 is quite weak, and d5 is also weak. White will take d5, but then rook will harass the queen and take on d4, and pawns will get traded, and it's going to be an equal game. But whom else do we call when we need someone who can win an equal endgame? Magnus Carlsen, of course. So that's the guy. Rook d8 attacks the queen. Queen drops back. And now Gukesh could have taken on d4, and actually the engine says it's even the best move. Because, yes, white attacks b7, but we attack f4, and we have won back the pawn, and we are a bit worse because we don't have the two bishops, but still, material is equal. But Gukesh is in no rush. He goes bishop f6. He wants to take maybe with a knight, or with a bishop, or maybe with a rook. Different possibilities. Queen takes b6, a takes b6. And now bishop e4, and this is the position. And you know, the Germans have this phrase "wer die Wahl hat die Qual," if I'm not misquoting this. And this means I've studied in Germany at a German university, and this means who has the choice has some struggle, has some problems because you have to choose, and all options look nice. Knight takes, knight will be in the center. Bishop takes, bishop will be like taking b2. Rook takes d4, probably good to exchange the rooks and to go into an equal endgame. So rook takes is what Gukesh chooses. Nothing bad with that move. Takes back, and here is the decisive moment of the game. Gukesh needed to take with the bishop, but. And here we come to the topic of why Gukesh is struggling so much recently. And I will discuss why Magnus struggles so much as well. So why is Gukesh struggling so much? Gukesh went for a pawn sacrifice, a very concrete idea. He took with the knight to sacrifice the b7 pawn, because he probably calculated rook c2. Knight takes, bishop takes, rook c2. And the b2 pawn is hanging, and also knight e2 with a fork on the king and the bishop. Is an idea, and he probably calculated this, takes, rook c2, and he forgot about a defensive resource for white. So the idea for black is they attack on b2, they attack this square, e2 square, and then they will win the bishop. If bishop c1, rook takes c1 is a beautiful tactic, takes, and winning with a fork. So it looks nice. No one can defend the b2 square. If rook here, then knight e2, again a fork with a check. But Gukesh overlooked a move bishop h6, which serves two purposes. First of all, there is knight e2 is no longer a fork. There is no bishop on h6, and second of all, we threaten rook e8 check. For example, if black takes the pawn, rook e8, not check but checkmate. It's just a checkmate. The king is in a so-called box here, and white is completely winning after bishop h6, because black will not be able to, well, black will be able to take one pawn, but at a very huge cost. So the problem of Gukesh is, in my opinion, and also I've discussed this with Vidit today. I recorded a podcast episode with him. It will be out shortly. Drop a comment if you are looking forward to it. And basically Vidit, I think, confirmed what I said. Gukesh is trying to play for a win in all games. He's trying to complicate things. He's like, there is this principle of not calculating unnecessary tactics. Do not can calculate unnecessary tactics. It's from some famous chess book. I forgot about it. And Gukesh, everybody knows he's a human calculator. He's like these guys from The Dune, the book and the movie. I've read the book, by the way. Really recommend it. These guys, they're called mentats, and they use this space spice, this substance, to enhance their brain to be able to calculate like computers. So that's an interesting concept developed by the Dune creator, Frank Herbert, the writer. And Gukesh obviously does not, as far as I know, does not use any like mind-altering substances, but he is a human calculator. He calculates very well, and he tries to calculate his way out of any position. And he calculated this line, which was totally unnecessary and so risky, because if you make one mistake in your calculation, it all goes bust. And this is exactly what happened. One mistake in a calculation, so he forgot that bishop h6 is a resource, probably, most likely. Otherwise, why go for this variation? And bishop h6, and now he has to drop back with the knight to stop the checkmating. But now white has, maybe he even saw this, maybe he even calculated this far, but he forgot about one move that white has. Here, if white goes, for example, rook b1, black has g5, this bishop is stuck, and black is still down a pawn, but black will win some material here, and it's a draw according to the engine. Maybe up until this moment is what Gukesh calculated, because he played 96 rather quickly as well. Maybe he just missed rook c1, which is the move played by Magnus. And Magnus is winning now. The best black can do is take this pawn, which Gukesh didn't do. But it's still a horrible, miserable position after rook c8 check. Black has to block with the knight, and then bishop d5, just making sure that the a2 pawn is protected. And look at those bishops, look at the king, look at the knight. Black is paralyzed. Black will lose this game. Even though material is equal, white will at some point win the b6 pawn, and yeah, it will be similar to what happened in the game. But after rook c1, black had already to say, okay, I'll have to defend this, even though it's 99% probability, I think, that Magnus wins this, converts this. Instead, Gukesh went into this endgame where there are two bishops against a bishop and a knight. But the problem is that if the pawns, for example, are on the same flank, on the same side of the board, like f, g, and h pawns, 3 pawns for both sides, it's most likely a draw, such a position. But the problem is that there are pawns on both sides of the board. White has b and a pawns. And even though black will win one of those pawns, even when white has one pawn on the queen side and black has one pawn on the queen side, this is enough to win such an endgame, because two bishops on an open board are so much better. And usually they will be able to win the remaining pawn on b6, and then there will be a passer supported by bishops. And it's easily winning. And Magnus is Magnus. Magnus will convert this. So knight c5, bishop d5, knight e4. I also think this is very instructive how he converts this. Please pay attention. It will be useful for your chess. Because most of mere mortals could potentially, I think even I, like being around 2000 in classical, even I, against Gukesh, I would be very nervous, and maybe I could mess this up, this endgame. Maybe I could instead of winning draw this. I hope losing this is out of question, but draw this probably I could. It takes some technique, so I will show you what exactly this technique means in this context. So first of all, the king moves closer. We will lose the b2 pawn. No need to try and hold on to it. For example, if b3, then knight c3. And whoops, there is an unpleasant surprise. This pawn is hanging, this bishop is hanging, and also this fork is hanging. So bishop c4, and black, after b5 and knight takes a2, it gets closer to equalizing. So we just sacrifice this pawn, but in endgames, kings should be activated. This is exactly what Magnus does. He's not in a rush. He activates his king. Then he knows that this is a weakness, and he wins, gradually wins this b6 pawn. Then his a pawn marches forward, and very important, when you are winning in an endgame, you need to prevent your opponent's counterplay. In middle game as well, by the way. So first of all, this is an important lesson that my grandmaster coach taught me. First of all, you should not think about how do I win in the fastest way possible. No, first of all, you should think, how do I win without any risk? How do I win while preventing any nonsense from my opponent? And this is exactly what Magnus is doing. So he first marches the king e2, bishop b3 also hitting this pawn. By the way, here is a trap. Gukesh is a human calculator who calculates really well. Short traps as well. So bishop b6 is bad because knight a4 attacks the bishop, and this will be a fork. And bishop a5 check takes. This is not a position that you can win even with an extra pawn. I think even like against me, Magnus Carlsen most likely would not be able to win this, because it is a dead draw with opposite colored bishops. One extra pawn is not enough to win this. Sometimes even with 2 extra pawns, opposite colored bishops, endgames are drawn. So that would be a fun way to fail, to blunder for Magnus, but he's not blundering. He's not in a rush. He does not fall for this trap. Bishop b6, knight a4. Instead, he goes king d2, marches his king closer, king d3. No rush. He's just coming to collect this pawn. And bishop a5, bishop b3, knight check, king c4. Now, in contrast to what I showed you before, to the variation where the dark squared bishop gets traded for the knight and even a knight and a pawn, that endgame is drawn. But if black takes the light squared bishop, it's not a draw. It's a win for white, because same colored bishops, when you have same colored bishops, it's close to what you get when you get pawn endgames without any pieces on the board. When you have an extra pawn in a pawn endgame, it's almost always a win, especially with several boards on pawns on the board. With bishops, it's the same. So we will just win the b6 pawn, and it will be a win, easy win for white. So that is why here black does not take on b3 and trade the knight for the light squared bishop. Black goes f5, and here is the source of black's counterplay. Gukesh, being a very resilient defender, relies on the following chess rule. Very instructive, very important. Remember this. When you are losing in an endgame, you should trade pawns, not pieces. When you are winning in an endgame, you should usually trade pieces, but not in a stupid way, not leading to opposite colored bishops endgame, for example. But otherwise, you should trade the pieces. So if you're winning, trade the pieces. If you're losing, trade the pawns. If Gukesh manages to trade all the f, h, and g pawns for white's f, h, and g pawns, it will be a draw, most likely, because the material will not be sufficient. Even if white wins the b6 pawn, black will be able to give up the knight for the a pawn, and 2 bishops against 1 bishop is usually a draw, unless there is a checkmating attack or something like that. So that's the last hope that Gukesh harbors here. So he wants to push those pawns, and what Magnus does here is very instructive. So first he goes for this pawn, f4, he draws back. Now he picks this pawn, and after knight e4, he can go bishop e1, but still this pawn will get lost on f2. So the pawn on f2 is not going to be saved, but it's okay. Black can take it. And now what he does is he prevents all counterplay. He makes it harder and harder for Gukesh to implement his plan. First he goes bishop d5, so he's not in a rush. He's not in a rush to push the pawn, for example. Most amateur players would probably do something like that. He's not in a rush. He first prevents any counterplay. So bishop d5 first. Bishop d4 check. We go here. g5. We go here. So now the king is needed probably somewhere closer to the king side in some variations to stop black's counterplay, which is exactly what he does. He marches the king back. Bishop draws back. Now bishop drops back. He prevents h5 because black here wants to go h5, g4, trade those pawns, and then go f3 and trade the remaining pawns, and there'll be just one white pawn remaining. And we prevent that. Bishop h3. Now Gukesh really wants to put into action that plan, so he wants to maneuver the knight to g3, where the knight will control h5, and then the plan goes on. So this is exactly what he does. But now white pushes finally the a pawn. And now king d5. King d5 is a nice move. Maybe the king will go to the king side to collect the pawns. h5, bishop c4, bishop c3. We allow g4, but only at the cost of a pawn. So this is exactly what happens. Black trades some pawns, but black has to give up one of the pawns. And one pawn will remain on the board, the g pawn. So if black manages to trade the f pawn for the g pawn magically somehow, then black has good drawing chances, but it's not going to happen. Knight f1, a6 check. Nice tactics. If black takes, bishop e2 check will win the knight, and with the remaining g pawn, white will win. So king e7, bishop e2, knight d2. Here black could have created this fork with the knight, but then white would fork black with the king. A very unique situation. So the bishop is still protecting a6. It's very important. We have one last pawn remaining, and the king will collect one of those pieces, and then we will win the game. How often do you see a king fork? That's funny. So instead of 93, Gukesh goes 92, but it's still hopeless. Here, Magnus remembers that if you're winning, you should trade the pieces, and he trades the bishops because it's a check. And this is a completely winning endgame because white still has the g-pawn. Without it, it could be potentially lost, not lost, but drawn. But with it, 2 pawns are enough to win in such an endgame. Black desperately tries at least f3. At least now, if white takes with a pawn, is going to be a draw, by the way, because the last pawn will get taken. So white has to take with the bishop, but then the king will be able to take on a6, and at least there's just one pawn of white remaining, but it's enough because the knight is not effective in stopping the advance of the pawn, and the bishop is very nicely cutting the king, the knight away. And you should know this rule: when you put your bishop 2 squares across enemy's knight, you are cutting it in the most efficient way. And then just the pawn marches, and here black resigns, because if knight g7, then king f6, and in several moves the knight will have to make way for the pawn, and the pawn will queen. So Magnus shows some endgame technique, very good play by Magnus. And Gukesh again shows that he is overly ambitious recently, and he's in bad shape. He has to do something about this. But what about Magnus? Why did he score so poorly? Yes, in the last game he won, but he lost 4 classical games, and he lost, I think, a couple of Armageddons as well. So what was going on with Magnus? I think it's a combination of factors. So obviously he's not working on chess as much as he used to. He has lost motivation. He doesn't have challenges in chess. He also has recently become a father, and he's probably sometimes tired because during the night the baby requires attention. This is all obvious. But I think another factor that people don't talk about often enough is the fact that other guys are getting stronger and stronger. His competition, his opposition is getting stronger and stronger. People are getting stronger at chess, like Erdogmush, the Turkish genius, wunderkind. Child prodigy. He's recently turned 15. His rating is close to Gukesh. I think Gukesh has dropped some rating points. He's close to 27-20, and Erdogmush is like 27-15. So at 15 already, people know so much. These guys, they work around the clock. Some of them come on my podcasts and share their secrets of preparation. Check out my podcast episodes if you haven't yet. And yeah, it's not that Magnus is like getting old and rusty. Maybe he is a little bit, but still, it's just that the competition is getting stronger, and with each year it will be harder and harder for Magnus to compete with them, unless he works as well, because while he's not working, they are working and they are improving. And Pragnananda Rameshbabu, who won this event in a spectacular fashion, winning the last 4 games in a row. Pragnananda definitely, by the way, another guest of my podcast, definitely works a lot. And Gukesh, even though he's struggling, definitely works a lot. Sindarov definitely works a lot and plays Counter-Strike for rest, but then works a lot. So that's the reason, in my opinion. By the way, I'm in Tashkent. I will be playing in the open section of US Chess Cup. And in the Masters section, there will be Nepo, Hans, Arjun, Vidit, lots of other strong players. Drop a comment if you want some recaps from me, and if you want some content from me from this event. And also, do you want recaps of my games? If you do, please let me know in the comments. If there are many comments about wanting recaps from me of my games, I will add them to, maybe I will create recaps where I recap Grandmaster games and then briefly recap my own games. What do you think about this idea? Drop a comment, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet. See you in the next one. Bye bye.